Hi, this is New Time on Silkway TV channel. We introduce you with the most visible news and important events that happened throughout this week in Kazakhstan and Central Asia. More details on politics, economy, social and cultural life with opinions from the most recognizable experts of Kazakhstan and world. I'm Davoren Isagulov and this is what you'll see today. State visit of the President of Kazakhstan to Mongolia, all about new agreements, strategic partnership and the joint goals of Astana and Ulaanbaatar. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development and partners commit €365 million to build a hospital in Kazakhstan. An exclusive interview with EBRD President Odile Renaud-Bassot. Less than a week until the US presidential elections. We'll analyze voter sentiment in swing states and find out how the election results will affect US policy in Central Asia in an exclusive interview with the US ambassador to Kazakhstan, Daniel Rosenblum. Kazakhstan has become Mongolia's first strategic partner in Central Asia. During President Tokayev's first-ever state visit to Mongolia, the two countries signed an historic agreement. In total, they signed 11 significant documents, including plans to boost bilateral trade to $500 million and exchange technologies for processing leather and wool. Additionally, Kazakhstan will build a plan for producing vaccines against foot-and-mouth disease for animals. Learn more on the outcomes of this high-level meeting in our next report. An honor guard dressed in a medieval Mongolian attire stood alongside a line of mounted cavalry. Every country adds its unique touch to the official protocol of high-level meetings. Mongolia chose to immerse the heart of its capital back in the era of Genghis Khan. In this extraordinary setting began Kassym-Jomart Tokayev's first visit to this neighboring country. The two presidents, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev and Ukhnaa Khurelsukh, ascend the steps of the government palace, where the main meetings will take place. 65 steps symbolizing the age of Genghis Khan lead up to a monumental statue of the legendary ruler of the Mongol Empire. Following tradition, the initial negotiations were held in a small group. Fittingly, they took place in a hall shaped like a yurt, a familiar setting for both presidents. The yurt is the traditional dwelling of nomadic peoples, and Kazakhs and Mongols are the heirs of nomadic civilizations. Speaking to his counterpart, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev noted that he attached special importance to his first visit to Mongolia. I have come to Mongolia at your invitation. It is a great honor for me and all members of the delegation. Today, important bilateral documents will be signed. I am convinced that this step will contribute to the expansion of cooperation. In turn, Mongolia's president emphasized the historical significance of President Tokayev's visit. A high-level meeting occurred after a 16-year interval. Kazakhstan has finally become the first among Central Asian countries to establish a strategic partnership with Mongolia. Nearly 30 years have passed since our countries established diplomatic relations. This state visit, occurring after a 16-year interval, holds special significance as it elevates the relationship between our two nations to an entirely new level. During the expanded negotiations, the parties discussed more practical but equally important issues. The economy was on the agenda. The trade turnover between Kazakhstan and Mongolia in 2023 amounted to only $133 million, mostly exports. Kassym-Jomart Tokayev proposed increasing this number to $500 million in the coming years. We should enhance cooperation in the field of trade and economy, agriculture, transport and logistics, mining industry, manufacturing, investments, new technologies and space exploration. Elevating our relations to a new level serves the interest of both countries. One of the new agreements is to build a joint pharmaceutical factory in Mongolia to produce foot-and-mouth disease vaccines. The two countries agreed to collaborate in the field of new technologies, mineral resources, attracting investments, and in the exploration and development of iron and phosphate deposits. Mongolia aims to boost its trade and economic potential through cooperation with the Eurasian Economic Union. We are committed to further developing bilateral and multilateral ties. In this context, Kazakhstan supports Mongolia's intention to conclude a free trade agreement with the Eurasian Economic Union. I am pleased to note that the Republic of Kazakhstan has become Mongolia's first strategic partner in Central Asia. Our official negotiations were successful, conducted in a warm and business-like atmosphere. We summarized our achievements over the past 30 years and productively exchanged views on enriching our cooperation. The presidents reinforced their cooperation by signing a joint declaration on establishing a strategic partnership. Additionally, delegation members exchanged 11 documents aimed at developing joint efforts in cooperation. President Tokayev also met with Mongolia's Prime Minister. As said by the head of state, the governments of both countries have significant work ahead to implement the new agreements. Today we have outlined the tasks facing the governments of our two countries to ensure the strategic nature of cooperation between Kazakhstan and Mongolia. We truly need major flagship projects that could give a significant boost to development. An equally remarkable part of the state visit was the tour of the National Museum of Genghis Khan. The museum showcases over 10,000 artifacts covering all periods of Mongolian statehood. Kassym-Jomart Tokayev left a note in the guest book stating, "May this center of spirituality serve for the benefit of the people of Mongolia." Daurian Isagulov, New Time. The third neighbor policy is a term coined in Mongolia to describe its official foreign policy. The country strives to pursue a multi-vector approach, a strategy it shares with Kazakhstan, notes Mongolian political and economic observer Jargal Sayhan Dambadarja. The two nations indeed have much in common, including vast territories and proximity to two major regional powers. We spoke with the Mongolian expert to learn more about how the country positions itself on the global stage. Mongolia is a semi-presidential republic that balances power between the president and parliament. The government is formed by the parliament, known as the State Great Khural. The president plays an important role by representing the country in international affairs and has veto power over some laws, although most of his duties are ceremonial. Positioned between two large countries, China and Russia, Mongolia must maintain a delicate geopolitical balance while aiming to develop a democratic system of governance. Even though it only borders these two nations, Mongolia refers to its foreign policy as the third neighbor policy.
The third neighbor is another terminology we use in our foreign policy because we have two neighbors, and the third neighbors are those countries with whom we have a virtually no border but close relations, in particular Western countries with whom we have very much common value for many years. And I mean, first of all, the US, European Union, India, and other countries. So we try to have this multi-vectoral, I say, foreign policy.
Mongolia's economic model heavily depends on exports to China, which consumes over 84% of the country's exported products, including strategic resources like coal, copper, and gold. The asymmetry in economic relations creates additional challenges for Mongolia, limiting its room for maneuver.
For example, with Russia, we depended on Russian fuel almost 100%. Now we are making our own refinery with the loan from India, and soon we will have our own oil refinery, which hopefully will balance the trade relations, trade balance with Russia. In terms of China, we, of course, because China is a large market, and like Kazakhstan, we almost all this mining minerals we send it to China.
The Mongolian government understands the vulnerability of resource-dependent economy and is working on diversification to provide everything necessary for its relatively small population of 3.5 million people. The country is creating free economic zones, such as those near the borders with China and Russia, to stimulate foreign investment and export development.
As a result, we have now per capita income $6,000 of GDP per year now, but it was just 4,000 2 3 years ago. And by 2028, 4 years from now, we will have $10,000 per capita, which is more or less the basis for further development of economic and political institutions into more inclusive directions. And challenge also facing, of course, corruption at different level, and the society is discussing it very openly.
Currently, political and expert circles in Mongolia are debating which region the country should associate with in the new geopolitical realities. It is likely that Mongolia will aim for more active participation in Central Asian affairs. The country's geographical position brings both advantages and challenges, compelling Mongolia to pursue a neutral and multilateral foreign policy, which undoubtedly opens up new opportunities for fruitful cooperation with all partners. Daurin Sagulov, New Time. We cannot afford to be isolated, former president of Mongolia, Nambaryn Ekhnbayar, said in an interview to Silk Way, answering reporters' question about further contribution of two countries in economic prosperity of the region. The former president of Mongolia also underlined the importance of their high-level visits that promote the agenda of bilateral cooperation. Please take a look at the fragment of the interview.
You have visited Kazakhstan when you was a president of Mongolia. Of course, a lot of things have changed since that, yes? And Central Asia, and this part of the world, used to be a remote area for the entire world. Now the things are changing. So I'm interested in how our countries, both Kazakhstan and Mongolia, can contribute into the further economic development of this region, and how do you see this economic development in particular?
Well, we have another similarity, which is not very good one. This is the status of landlocked countries.
Yes,
Kazakhstan is a landlocked country. Although you have Caspian Sea, we are a landlocked country. So I think, given the fact that geographically we are landlocked countries, now we have to work even more, 2 times more active, be more active to bring other countries, the interests of other countries into this region, Central Asia, Northeast Asia. So I think Kazakhstan cannot afford of being isolated in Central Asia. Mongolia cannot afford of being isolated in Northeast Asia. So I think working together, we can open up our countries to the world, and we'll be able to overcome that difficulty, which is our landlockedness.
More details and exclusive interviews from the first state visit of President Tokayev to Mongolia you, as always, can watch in the new episode of Reporter with President program this Sunday on Silkway. Kazakhstan is set to launch around 200 major infrastructure projects with foreign investments. This was announced at the 36th meeting of the Foreign Investors Council held in Astana. Key global investors with total capital exceeding hundreds of millions of dollars gathered in the Kazakh capital to discuss the new investment cycle of the country, aiming to attract an additional $150 billion over the next 5 years. Let me remind you that since gaining independence, Kazakhstan has secured $417 billion in investments. President Tokayev chaired discussions on past achievements and future goals with those who have supported the country's economic potential.
The newly enacted 2029 National Infrastructure Plan opens a door of opportunities for local manufacturers. Some 200 large-scale infrastructure projects estimated at more than $86 billion will be pursued. The government will form a list of products for localization through off-take contracts. A highly skilled workforce is essential for industrial growth. That's why I declared 2025 the year of working professions. We seek investors ready to advance the quality of Kazakhstan's technical and vocational education and enhance educational infrastructure. Projects.
Kassym-Jomart Tokayev highlighted key sectors with significant investment potential, including geological exploration, water resources industry, green energy, agriculture, transport and logistics. He emphasized the importance of energy resources, noting that Kazakhstan's oil production has tripled over the past 30 years. The country has now positioned itself among the top 5 nations for growth in oil production. Looking ahead, Kazakhstan aims to boost its oil extraction to 100 million tons annually, while also prioritizing the development of its own petrochemical industry.
In 2022, the largest polypropylene plant in Central Asia with an annual capacity of 500,000 tons. This facility now meets almost 60% of domestic demand and exports its products to Europe, Turkey, and China. In September of this year, we started construction of polyethylene plant with capacity of 102 million tons per year. A number of petrochemical projects valued at $14 billion are under consideration.
The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development intends to invest 2 billion euros in Kazakhstan's economy in the coming years. This was discussed during a meeting between Kassym-Jomart Tokayev and the bank's president Odile Renaud-Bassot, who arrived in Astana to participate in the Foreign Investors Council meeting. Parties discussed prospects for joint projects in finance, housing and communal services, energy, medicine, information, technology and other sectors. President Tokayev highly valued the strategic nature of cooperation with the bank and its contribution to the progress of Kazakhstan's economy. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, in collaboration with 5 other banks, will allocate 365 million euro for the construction of a 630-bed hospital in Kazakh city of Kokshetau. This was announced by the head of the EBRD, Odile Renaud-Bassot, in an interview to New Time reporter Balzhan Samigulina. According to her, this is the first project of its kind in Central Asia. Construction of the hospital is expected to begin in April next year. Additionally, in a boost for Kazakhstan's economy, the EBRD is set to double its investments in the country, reaching over 600 million euros this year compared to 250 last year. EBRD President Odile Renaud-Bassot also highlighted key projects, including the first public-private partnership in Central Asia, focused on healthcare, and emphasized a strong commitment to green energy initiatives.
EBRD is very active in Kazakhstan. Within these years of its operation in Kazakhstan, we've seen 10 billion of euros invested into the economy of Kazakhstan through over 300 projects. What new, huge, perhaps, prospective project can be announced now that is going to be implemented in our country as well?
So, I mean, the big new priority for us in the last few years, and which are accelerating now, is the green transition and supporting the expansion of renewable in the countries. There are a lot of projects, and we have been supporting the government to develop auction to get the best price, and there is a lot of, I mean, also bilateral agreements with big international companies to develop renewable, which there are a lot of potential here. The other big new opportunities is related to the development of PPPs, and we are going to sign today the first PPP in healthcare in Central Asia with Kochako Hospital, which is 650 bed, I think, which will be developed in Kazakhstan, and a very exciting project for us. We already had a PPP with Bakad, which was the bypass around Almaty, and now this hospital is a new area and a new type of project.
Yeah, that's a very exciting. Let us stop a little bit on that. What's the timing for this project, when it's going to be implemented? By which year?
So we sign now, and I think the construction will start in April because of the winter period, and I think it's expected for 2 years to work for 2 years for being built up and ready to open.
What about the fundraising for this project? Is it only EBRD project or with a collaboration with someone?
No, it's a project. We are part of the project with financing, but it brings together a lot of other financial institutions. I think the overall cost is 365 million euros, and we bring together private sector banks and together with our financing.
I guess it's the first project such huge and such amount in healthcare in Central Asia.
Absolutely, it's the first public-private partnership for an hospital in Central Asia.
Yeah, and you already mentioned that green transition is one of the focuses of EBRD historically has been. And what long-term and perhaps medium-term project can be announced here in Kazakhstan? As you mentioned, we have huge potential in this regard.
So we will continue to invest in renewable and bringing renewable plus battery storage, which is important in order to balance because renewable energy are intermittent. So we are also, in relation to this development of renewable, working very much on the network and with Kazakh in order to strengthen the grid. Electricity grid, and we will need, I mean, much more will need to be done on the distribution and so forth, so as to develop electricity, and access to energy. We are very, I mean, the government has announced, and the president has announced new plan for investing in infrastructure with 80 billion objective, and we will certainly be part of it. And we think that there is a lot of investment that can be done in order to improve connectivity in Kazakhstan.
And transport,
yes, the middle corridor, and in transport, railway, ports, and also in water management, which is a big issue for Central Asia. So these are areas of priority for us. On the social dimension, inclusion, and in particular gender inclusion is also one of our top priority, and that we try to include in each project a dimension to facilitate inclusion, participation of women, and so forth.
Also the focuses of our country's development, I guess. And I've seen the statement of EBRD that most of loans last year have been provided in Kazakh tenge. And I wanted to know how, to what extent these processes have been, these financial processes with the EBRD have been done in our national currency, and what's the trend for this?
So indeed, Kazakhstan is one of the countries where we do the most of financing in local currency. I think it's more than 80% overall. Right. And this is the outcome of a very good cooperation we have with the central bank on, and we issue in local currency. So we finance ourselves on tenge so as to have the liquidity to be able to finance our project. And I think that's a very effective way to support local businesses and so forth, because they do not have to bear the exchange rate risk. And we are very happy to that, and this is a model of what we can do in other countries also.
My last question, Ms. Renabasso, what's the plan of EBRD for Kazakhstan or Central Asia for the coming 5 years?
So we have a clear strategy for Kazakhstan, which is based on competitiveness, green transition, inclusion, and we will deploy this strategy. We have strategies also for all the other Central Asian countries. I think, as I was saying, green transition supporting Central Asian country moving towards and benefiting from the advantage of the green transition is one of the big priority for us, but also competitiveness and development of the economies, with focusing on the development of the private sector, local businesses, but also foreign direct investment, and development of people. So inclusion, all this will be part of our agenda. We believe that we will increase our investment in the region. Probably this year our total investment will be above 2 billion euros. So I think that's a good sign of our commitment to the development of the region, which is, in the current geopolitical context, is a very strategic place and important area for the world stability.
Yeah, and just memorize that there was an announcement that EBRD will double its amount of investments to Kazakhstan. How close are we?
Yes, so we will more than double this year. Compared with last year, we will more than double this year. In 2024, we probably will be between $600 and $700 million, when last year I think we were around 250. So I think it will be it's a big step. It of course depends, because we have big projects with entities like Kazakh that really has increased our volume of financing, and it's a very good news.
Great. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Following a large meeting, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev also held a series of discussions with the participants of the Foreign Investors Council session. He specifically spoke with the president of Microsoft for Central and Eastern Europe and Central Asia, Michel Simons, about collaboration in developing the IT industry and creating an ecosystem for startups. The Kazakh president was informed that the Kazakhstan office of the corporation has been transformed into a multi-regional hub covering Central Asia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, Mongolia and Pakistan. Additionally, plans are in place to establish a national center for artificial intelligence next year. President Tokayev also met with the CEO of Solid Core Resources, Vitaly Nezis. The company is now set to build a new hydrometallurgical complex in Kazakh city of Pavlodar and geological laboratory in Karaganda. Kazakh president noted the importance of the measures taken by the company to prepare engineering personnel for the domestic industry. And let's move on to another hot topic. With a few days to go until the November 5th election, more than 60 million of Americans have already cast their vote before the election, which national polls and surveys in swing states show is a close race between Republican Donald Trump and Democrat Kamala Harris. Both candidates have been working to win over the remaining sliver of undecided and independent voters in swing states while turning out their prospective-based supporters to vote early or show up at ballot stations. What will be the outcome of this race that people are traditionally following not only in the US itself? Is American society truly divided in half? And who makes up these halves? Balzhan Samigulina spoke with experts and gathered their insights.
On November 5th, America will choose its 47th president in a race that has surpassed expectations. Experts noted a deep divide in American society, but the makeup of the parties has been changing. According to Pew Research Center, 44% of Democratic voters now identify as Black, Asian, Latino, or from other racial backgrounds, while 45% hold a college degree and 47% do not identify as Christians. Professor Robert Shapiro from Columbia University confirmed these changes, outlining shifts in American politics.
What's happened recently as well, and has made the Republican Party even more competitive and has led to close elections, the Republicans have been doing better, Trump in particular, among minority voters. He hasn't been getting an enormous support from minority voters, but Democrats have typically gotten 90% of the Black vote or more, and he's reduced that by a few percentage points, and enough to make a difference in particular states, and especially also among Latinos, where the Democrats really need to get about 70% of the Latino vote in order to do well. And he's been doing better and has been cutting that down to 60% or even lower.
Earlier, former President Donald Trump spoke to supporters at Madison Square Garden, making his case against Democratic candidate Kamala Harris, despite New York's Republican drought since 1984. The Republican candidate vowed to tackle immigration, curb inflation, and urge attendees to vote early. Addressing around estimated 20,000 supporters, he criticized Harris, claiming her policies, he said, have weakened the country.
Next Tuesday, you have to stand up and you have to tell Kamala Harris that you've done a terrible job.
Comedian Tony Hinchcliffe made controversial remarks, joking that Latinas love making babies and calling Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. These comments drew backlash from Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris, Puerto Rican celebrities, and congressional Republicans. Experts said such statements could hurt Republican support, particularly among Puerto Rican voters in key states. While Trump has been gaining ground with Latino voters, these remarks may dampen his appeal. Notably, despite raising a record $56 million for Democrats campaign, Republicans currently lead in each of the swing states. With around 240 million eligible voters this election, swing states are likely to decide the next president.
As we can talk about, Trump leading by maybe as much as 1 percentage point on average in the key 7 battleground states, but that's 1 percentage point, and we need to take into account sampling error, other errors associated with doing surveys, and especially errors associated with estimating exactly who's going to vote in the election. So the common wisdom about the current election is that the election really is too close to call. We're talking about one candidate or the other having a probability of winning of a little bit more than 50% at most.
Former President Barack Obama, Bruce Springsteen and John Legend railed in Philadelphia to support Harris and warn of the implications of another Trump term for American working-class values. The Observer said the event held a festival atmosphere, attracting nearly 10,000 enthusiastic fans. However, experts suppose Harris' stance on the Gaza conflict could sway voters toward Trump. The Arab and Muslim vote has become increasingly influential, especially in key swing states where even slight shift in turnout can impact results. This election, the community is more united than ever over Israel's actions in Gaza, and any candidate seeking support will need to address calls for an end to the conflict. Harris began her campaign focusing on this issue.
We can and we must seize this opportunity to end this war and bring the hostages home. And I will do everything in my power to meet that end.
Harris announced new policy proposals targeting Black Americans, including forgivable small business loans and the National Health Equity Initiative. The Democrat campaign, along with former President Barack Obama, is worried about whether black men will turn out on November 5th as they have in past elections. The share of eligible black voters has increased significantly since the last election, enhancing their electoral power.
The Democrats are going to win the overwhelming proportion of black voters. The question is it going to be 90% or better, which they've usually gotten, or will it be closer to 85%, which can have a decisive effect in particular states where there are large black populations, such as some of the southern states, North Carolina and Georgia, but also blacks living in major cities in the United States, in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So those kinds of things. That's something that really is of significant concern to the Democrats, and the Harris campaign has been trying hard to hold and persuade black voters.
The campaign events are part of the candidates' final push in a tight race. Analysts said American society was nearly evenly divided, and the outcome would hinge on voters' preferences in foreign and domestic policy. Relations with Central Asia, they noted, would pay on personal diplomacy, an area where Democrats were generally more engaged than Republicans. Baljan Samigulina, New Time.
U.S. foreign policy towards Central Asia and Kazakhstan will remain consistent regardless of the outcome of the presidential elections, said U.S. Ambassador to Kazakhstan Daniel Rosenblum in an exclusive interview with New Time. He noted that over the past decades, the United States has consistently supported the sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity of the region's countries, irrespective of the administration's party affiliation. Moreover, Daniel Rosenblum discussed the close cooperation between the two countries. Please watch the fragment of this interview. So, dear Ambassador, thank you very much that you agreed to do this interview. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you. So, let me start with this question. The entire world awaits the US elections. So, my question is, how could you describe the mood in American society at this very moment? And how is it going to affect the upcoming presidential elections?
So there's a lot of anticipation in America right now, just like in the rest of the world. A lot of focus on the upcoming election. As is obvious, I think, to most people in the world, our political system right now is very closely divided between the two parties and the two candidates. So everyone is wondering the outcome. I think it's interesting to note that in a democracy, you don't know the outcome of every election in advance. That's one of the features of it, and that's very much true in our country right now, and this particular one. I personally have been through many elections and many changes of administration. I've worked at the State Department for almost 28 years, and in that time have worked under 5 different presidents, going back to President Bill Clinton. I think the good thing in terms of foreign policy and especially policy here in Central Asia is that there's been more continuity than change over those years, even as administrations have changed. And I expect the same to happen after this election as well. But of course, you know, everyone is wondering what the outcome will be. We'll see in less than a week, and then, you know, I don't predict there will be any big change in policy towards Central Asia.
How would you evaluate the strategic partnership between US and Kazakhstan in recent years. So which areas have seen the most increase and development?
Yeah, it's, I would evaluate it highly. You probably expected I would say that because I'm responsible for this bilateral relationship here in Kazakhstan as the ambassador. But in fact, I think there's a lot of really tangible progress that we've made in the relationship in recent years. Just last month, or in late September, so about a month ago, was this meeting in New York City on the margins of the UN General Assembly of the C5+1. The 5 foreign ministers of the Central Asian countries meeting with our Secretary of State. And I think that meeting demonstrated that the level of trust is very high, the level of cooperation is very high. And I will add that Kazakhstan has consistently been a leader in that effort, has been pushing for more global cooperation, more regional cooperation, and working with the U.S. as a partner. Of course, there's many more aspects to our strategic partnership than I can summarize in a few words in this interview, but I will say that, you know, in every area, whether it's security cooperation between our two countries, economic cooperation, or cooperation on political or governance issues, we see progress in every field. And on the sort of political and governance side of things, we maintain, just in the last 2 to 3 years, we've, I would say, intensified our dialogue with Kazakhstan on issues of human rights. We have something we call the high-level dialogue on human rights. And, you know, while there are areas of more progress and areas of less progress, we've just in the last year seen some breakthroughs in Kazakhstan, I think, with respect to domestic violence, with respect to trafficking in persons, with new legislation being passed. And obviously that's not solely because of the relationship between the U.S. and Kazakhstan, but I believe that's contributed to some of these areas of progress.
I can't help but ask you, amid the global sanctions, how is U.S. and Kazakhstan are working together to face these challenges?
Yeah, the sanctions that are in place, of course, I think everyone understands, are not targeted at Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan, of course, because of its geographic position, its economic relationships, is affected, though, and we understand that. And so we've especially appreciated the position that the government of Kazakhstan has taken on this question, given its relationships and its economic ties with Russia. And the position has been consistently that Kazakhstan will not violate the international sanctions and will not be a platform for avoiding the sanctions or circumventing the sanctions. That's not easy to achieve, and we've worked very closely as partners with the government of Kazakhstan to make it easier by explaining the different sanctions rules, especially because they change over time as more sanctions are added, by sometimes doing briefings for the private sector as well, the banks and companies here, so that they understand the rules as well. And when specific challenges arise, where Kazakhstan is being especially hurt by one of the sanctions, we talk about ways that can be mitigated. Again, it's never simple, but we're sensitive to the impact all of this has on Kazakhstan.